people are settled in. Well, first of all, thanks to everybody for coming tonight and for bringing the food and just gathering together here. It's really, really nice. I'm going to just introduce all three of the folks that we're going to have speaking, and then we'll go into the program. So first is Lise Meloy. She is a very familiar face to everybody else but Jennifer here, and she has assumed many roles. Hey, Tim, welcome.
Sit down, buddy.
Well, there's food, Tim. There's food first, if you'd like any. Or something to drink. Or something to drink. Oops. So Lisa's going to introduce the whole session with a very brief comment on where the Presbyterian Church USA stands. They have a position paper, and she's going to just give us a very quick outline about where PC USA stands on public education. And then I'm excited to have two people with a deep history and understanding about this whole issue of funding public education in Pennsylvania. First of all is Jennifer Hoff. She's a longtime resident of Lansdowne and school director since 2007 in the Penn School District. She's a small business owner and very active in the community there. She sits on the school district's budget and finance committee, and she's been a very active participant in the long-term litigation for fair funding and an advocate for the children of both Penn School District and the other students in Pennsylvania. And you can embroider or add to that as you go along, but that seemed
it's all my
to capture. Okay. And then Tim Kearney, you all ought to know because he is the state senator for the 26th district of Pennsylvania. And I think everyone here is a constituent, is my guess. Oh no, you guys are. That's right.
We're all Riddle Village.
Riddle.
Ron Cash.
Everybody
On
else.
the side of the Crumb Creek.
Yeah, that's right. Well, close, everybody. He's a resident of Swarthmore, where he and his wife have a design and architecture firm there.
She says she fired me 5 years ago.
Oh, really? When you
Stop
started
showing up
this?
for work.
I was just reading off of, so. And he served as mayor, and he served as councilperson in Swarthmore, and maybe one of the more important credentials is that you're a son of a teacher.
Well, that's true.
What type of teacher? It just said son of a teacher.
Oh, she was a 6th grade teacher in St. Joe's grade school. Township, New Jersey.
I'm the daughter of a teacher. 3 generations of
All right.
teachers.
We've got a couple retired teachers here.
Yeah.
Well, anybody else have teachers, either were teacher or had teacher relatives? Yeah, I did too, my mom and my aunt. Okay,
I'm still on the
and,
faculty of drugs. Teaching nurses.
okay, all right. And at least what your website says is that you are on the local government committee of the state senate, the appropriations committee, and the education committee, so.
And transportation.
And transportation. So between the two of them, we got all the info we need. And so go ahead.
Okay. Well, thanks for coming tonight. As you know, our overall theme is on who's our neighbor, loving our neighbor, and tonight's presentation is specifically on public education in Pennsylvania. How do we fund it? How do we make school funding equitable and more effective? And if you've been to the Peacemaking and Social Justice programs in the past, which I think almost everybody here has, you know that we've begun each program with an introduction on how the subject matter relates to our roles as Christians. And we at least try to demonstrate that the subject matter is consistent with Jesus' teaching, scripture, and our denomination as Presbyterians. So it turns out that unlike last year when we were doing, elections and voting and all of that stuff that was a little bit more controversial, this is a very easy one. I think all of you know that the Presbyterian Church has always been very vocal in, the need for education and particularly public education. In Scripture, the Old Testament in Proverbs says that having wisdom and understanding is better than silver or gold. 2 Timothy tells us that we should study and show God that we understand truth. And if you were here on Sunday, Pastor Francois mentioned that John Calvin, the father of the Reformation, advocated for free education for all. Excuse me. He reformed the Geneva public schools and made the schools available for all children, regardless of gender or wealth. In the same vein, John Knox, the Scottish reformer, also advocated for a school in every parish. And yet another John, Reverend John Witherspoon, one of America's founding fathers, was credited with bringing that same Scottish Reformed educational tradition to the U.S. And Presbyterians as a denomination has been a force for education in the world for close to 2 centuries, helping hundreds of thousands of children to learn to read and write. And our church's core belief that every child is created in the image of God motivated our early mission workers to reach out to new communities with the offer of a quality education. And Presbyterian Church USA has continued that tradition, and in 2010 published a 60-page paper aptly named Loving Our Neighbors, Equity and Quality in Public Education. It was as if they knew we were going to have this presentation 20 years later, right? Very strange. And in this paper, our denomination makes numerous recommendations for greater fairness in public education. And specific to our talk tonight, PCUSA calls upon our elected state and local officials to reform the way that public education is currently financed, from an approach based largely on property taxes, which perpetuates and exacerbates class and racial disparities in poor urban and rural school districts, to an approach that provides an equitable allocation of funds to school systems according to the financial need that schools require in order to attain agreed minimum standards in the provision of instructional inputs, qualified teachers, and physical facilities. Furthermore, that while some families can choose alternatives such as homeschooling, charter or private schools, the vast majority of our children, 84% at the time of this writing of this paper, will continue to be educated in public schools. So the privilege to choose an alternative for one's own child and the privilege of exercising this right based on one's own resources does not absolve anyone from the obligation to financially support the public schools that educate the majority of our society's members. The paper goes on to make numerous other recommendations which are pertinent to our educational systems, but not as germane to the discussion tonight. So I did print out on the tables behind you, there are some, the full list of the recommendations that PCUSA has in this paper so that you don't have to read the entire 60 pages. So with that set up,
There you go.
Jennifer, why don't you take?
I'm coming over.
Yeah, coming over to sit next to Tim.
You want to start? You start. Our boss Sarah is here.
I know,
be
sorry, that's
careful.
right. So I think that the best place to start is just by trying to make sure everybody understands how complicated and complex this whole issue is. It's not just simply we need to fund schools better, although that's something we obviously need to do. I think that the way we fund public education in Pennsylvania has changed, and it continues to build upon itself. We keep digging ourselves further and further into a hole as opposed to lifting ourselves out. I think it's, just by comparison, in the state of Delaware, the state pays for 85% of every kid's educational costs. And the 15% that's left over is made up by local taxes. That's why property taxes in Delaware are tiny compared to what they are in Pennsylvania. In the 1980s, we, the legislature, provided 50% of the cost of every kid's education. And the rest was made up at that time. But at that time, if you remember, that was when there was a move made by the Department of Education, State Department of Education, to consolidate school districts, to make school districts get bigger and try to do away with some of the really tiny ones that we had. So, what's that?
That failed.
Well, but no, I mean, that's how you wound up with Strathaven High School out of Providence and Swampville, for example. And at that time, when that was happening, the discussion was around this threat that the state was going to start taking over more and more aspects of public education. In particular, curriculum was the biggest thing that was under discussion. So the deal that was, the quote-unquote deal that was made was that the Department of Education would leave curriculum to the local school boards, but they'd give them less money. So even now with all the major, we've given so much more money, or trying to pour it back into the educational system over the last really 3 to 4 years. We're still at only about 32%, 33% of what the state actually provides. Now keep that in mind. I'm going to go on a bit of a tangent again. That's okay. I'm sorry.
Preach, brother.
That is really, property taxes is what the vehicle that's used to generate the rest of that income to educate students. It's a self-fulfilling, it's the more we built our society around sort of exclusive communities, or you could buy a house in this community because it had a good school system, self-perpetuating, I guess is the word I was trying to get to. And it's like the wonders of compound interest in reverse. So, not to pick on them, but the Radners of the world, for example, on a percentage basis, they pay relatively low property taxes because their properties tend to be larger, more expensive, worth more. It's a high wealth community. You have to scrape off just a little bit of that wealth in order to spend 3.5 times what they spend in the William Penn district per student. But it's still all public education. So, to me, it's almost like a societal problem that we have in Pennsylvania because we all buy into it. We all buy into trying to live in a nice neighborhood. We buy into the idea that we want our kids to go to a good school. We kind of, all those things keep making it more and more difficult to find a solution and to figure out how we respond to the almost 800-page
768.
That was the Supreme Court?
No, that was the last.
Well, it was a Commonwealth Court,
Yeah.
but it's, yeah. You may have noticed that since I've been in the Senate, Jen has kind of been sitting on my shoulder right here, in my ear, telling me about the William Penn perspective on all these things, and it's been invaluable to me in terms of the work that we're attempting to do. So I say that all basically as a way of getting the conversation started, because I think this should be a conversation. I don't think this should be a presentation per se. And I think that, the court made it very clear that the problem was with the legislature, and the legislature needed to fix it. They don't prescribe how to fix it. They just tell us, they describe what the problem is, and they tell us we need to fix it. Since that decision came down, I often picture it as a 800-pound gorilla sitting in the corner of the Capitol, and we're all doing our best to ignore it. There is, and that's not really fair or true, but I think
It's true.
There is a basic education funding commission that was formed, and it's been having meetings around the state, having various people testify, and it's an interesting time in Harrisburg right now because the House is controlled by Democrats for the first time in 12 years.
One of them.
Yeah,
Slim margin.
102 to 101. But they passed some very interesting things today around responsible contracting language, which is really, I think, very good as a statewide thing. There's others.
Get our RCO.
That's right, rather than RCO. And there are, it'll be interesting to see what happens, but they're talking about moving the primary date up a week for, Republicans wanted it to be a month because they wanted the presidential primary to be, they wanted Pennsylvania to have more say, kind of the whole thing. But we're kind of threading the needle because the 23rd, which is what the day that is scheduled for now, is Passover. And we talked about moving it to the 9th, and then someone did all the math and figured out that the 9th was probably going to be the end of Ramadan. So
Yeah.
16th kind of presented itself. So we'll see where that goes. But I actually left Harrisburg today before that was where the House had gotten that far. That's right, when you can. Stuff is happening. I mentioned the Democratic control because the Republicans still control the Senate, and this is a bicameral, bipartisan commission that's going around the meeting, but it still needs the influences are different in terms of what people are concerned about and what the various how it might actually come in to become legislation. It's going to require both houses to really work together in ways that we're finding even more problematic. I think the sense. It was interesting because back in April and May, I was feeling really good about the process of what was happening because we were starting to have conversations with our Republican colleagues around legislation. In particular, or specifically, we were talking with Senator Brooks, who's from out west, and she chairs the Health and Human Services Committee. We have some bills around hospital reforms because we sort of figured out that private equity might not be the best people to run hospital systems.
Shocking.
And it's legislation that won't fix what happened or what's happening, continues happening with Crozier and Prospect Medical, but it can prevent it from ever happening again. So it's interesting. We were having these conversations. Things were moving along, I think, pretty well. Sometime in mid-June, it became obvious that the governor and the Senate Republicans weren't quite on the same page around school vouchers, which is they tried to rename it. They called it a PASS program, I think. They tried everything to sort of, and it was kind of one of those things where I think the governor said one thing and somebody else heard it quite a little bit different, and then things kind of went off on their own tangents. And, but the chilling effect that it had on that on those conversations was dramatic. And all those doors kind of slammed shut and are just starting to be pried open. Really this week, I think, is the first time we're here.
Get a fresh budget soon?
I don't know. It's we're the Democratic House and the Republican Senate, we're now going back and forth on some of these things. And, because what happens with the spending bills is that either house, they can originate in either the House or the Senate, but they have to be concurred. And then, so that if we pass something, we send it over to the House says, I don't really like that. And they added like 16 things to it and took some things out, sent it back to us, and leadership said, well, I don't like this either. We stripped those out, put the, so we're in the middle of that kind of back and forth.
Even though it was supposed to be like June 30th?
June 30th, that's right. But that's only
And my budget's done.
That's only by the Constitution. Yeah, but you have to do your.
I did my budget.
I know you did.
I guessed wrong. I got a hole,
Yeah.
a big hole.
Yeah, I had a bill to increase the level up funding. So level up is.
And it got nixed.
Not quite yet, but we're still, it's not, my bill got this because I was asking for 400 million to put into it. So level up was something that we did 2 years ago as a way of trying to get at this inequity in funding. And it provided, the first time we passed it provided $100 million to the 100 school districts that were in the worst financial shape. And it was, in my memo that I wrote about trying to increase it to 400 this year, was that I thought of it as a down payment on what we needed to do according to the court case in order to try to make things. And here, for a level up, William Penn School District was one of them, Upper Darby obviously was one of them, and I think Interborough, I think was the other one that was.
Probably Southeast Delco too.
Yeah, it's not my district, so I don't really care.
We're all neighbors. There you go. There you go.
But, no, but it's, I keep doing all the talking here, Jen, you know something?
I'm ready.
Are you ready? Okay. Well, I think this is all, I mean, when it said it's a complex and multifaceted issue, this is the kind of stuff I'm talking about. You know, in the Senate, it became clear to me that when you do one thing over here, it does 16 things over here, and you have to sort of go back and forth trying to figure out what those things really mean. I actually heard some real conversation today about actually maybe having to raise taxes in order to attack this issue, and that's always been a no-no in Pennsylvania. We really haven't done. In fact,
They pass it down to me.
well, school districts are about the only people who really raise taxes.
Right, because nobody else has the guts.
Right, that's right.
Oh, and in your defense, in school district's defense, property taxes are a steady form of income that they can pretty much rely on, relative to other things.
It's awful though.
Well, but you never know how much money you're going to get from us until after you submit your budget.
Right,
And it's
yeah, it's awful.
so.
I follow the rules, you don't.
I got nothing.
I have to say that working with Tim, and I say it as working with, is a joy. We get it, and we're surrounded in lots of spaces that folks that don't. And it's unfortunate. I tell a story. It's summer of 1997. I'm pregnant with my twins. I'm standing in front of my home I just bought in Lansdowne. Just looking at it, I'm huge. It's not a pretty picture. And a neighbor, who I'm actually still friends with, comes up to me and says, the contractor that did the 50 windows on that house did them wrong. They didn't have the Mullins,
Right.
yeah, mullions, on the windows, and you just moved into a really bad school district. And I was like, oh, jeez, let me unpack. And I'm not unpacking because I'm huge. And that sort of stuck with me. As soon as, Sarah and Jacob were born, I started attending school board meetings. And what I saw, right, because I come from 3 generations of teachers. My grandmother, my mom, and my sister. The other side's entrepreneurs. That's the side I went with. I started attending, and what I got was, it's mostly people of color school district. And I couldn't ascertain if they were saying it was a bad school district because the kids were black, or it was really a bad school district. And I don't know what that looks like, because what is a bad school district, right? Are there bad young people in it? Not really. I have a 5% butthead rule. I can find them in any church, any synagogue, any room on the planet. 5% of people are going to be buttheads. And that happens in a school too. Every school. But when my kids act out, it looks different. So really, and it's, fortuitous that we're having the conversation here, so this is a social justice issue. And at its very core, it's about social justice. What makes a child in Radnor worthy of an education with Corian countertops? My kids were in speech and debate, mock trial, and they would go to these schools and they're like, Mom, these schools! And they had the foresight to say, why do the kids need that? Why do they need those Corian countertops? What does that do for their education? And I'm like, their parents can afford it. And And so what makes that child entitled to that education, but a Penwood student not? And there's no reason, like, there's just no reason. Their parents make more, that entitles them to a better education? No, that's like not true. And we can draw a line between a poor education, not learning to read by 3rd grade, and jail. We can draw that line, clear as day, like clear as day. So we are choosing to invest in a penal system instead of an education system. And it's weird, like I am pro-choice. You educate your child any way you want, I don't care. We don't call it homeschooling anymore, we call it home education. Just for those talking about it. And I don't know why we changed the names and stuff, but it makes people feel better.
That's right.
Like I'm all, like you wanna have charter schools, that's great. But make them follow the same rules. Like the teachers have the same certifications.
Yes.
You take any child, and you don't bump the hard ones back to me, right? And like they look the same. Now, we should not be giving public money to private schools through EITC. Like, forget it. Like, that's just malarkey, right? They're private schools. If they want to raise their money, they can. They're not entitled to public dollars.
Wait, can you explain that for those of us who don't understand?
So vouchers are basically set aside money. Do we call it EITC? Do we call it
Well,
vouchers?
there's two
What do
different
we call
things.
it?
Well, vouchers are when families get money directly from the government for educational costs.
EITC is where.
EITC is a tax credit that people can buy the tax credit and the money goes to the school.
Right.
So it's a displacement thing. It's still, and I think,
Public dollars.
and it's the way we've been sort of appeasing the Republican majority for the last 8 years is setting up a system that's complicated enough that most people can't follow what it really means or where the money's going.
Right, so all EITC vouchers are all public dollars, different directions, going into private schools.
And they're being used to pay for children to attend private schools in our state right now.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
Now, they say it's a way for a child from my bad district to go to Haverford School. In truth, they were not taking my child from a bad district. That child needs too many resources. They're not set up for it. They can't participate in the prom to the level of the other people. And it's just, but it is an appeasement.
But, yeah, and that's even part of the, I mean, there's, besides the EITC, there's the OSTC, which is,
Right.
which it basically is a set aside for poor kids, for people below the poverty level and whatever. And the only thing you need to know is that the OSTC is funded at about around 1/10 of what the EITC is. And the way the EITC works, there's no checks and balances to it. We don't, once that is out there and that
Right.
money is funded for it to support it, then we in the legislature don't have any idea what the money's used for. We don't have any idea what the outcomes are of the kids who are using it or not, and all those other sorts of
What's the law that says when we do badly on a test, we have to write a letter to all of our parents that says, we failed this test, I'm paraphrasing, we failed this test, it's the OSTC, right? That's available to you. If you want to leave, you can apply for this grant, fill in long URL that a parent can't read, and you can leave William Penn.
So there's no follow-up on this? You give them the money, and there's no follow-up?
Basically, that's the way most charter schools work that way. Certainly the cyber charter schools work that way. We don't, we hear the stories from the Jennifers of the world about, students who come back after being in a charter school or in particularly a cyber charter school for any length of time, and they come back way behind people that behind their other classmates. There's other kinds of things. There's no, it's stunning to me because in Harrisburg, we're all about metrics. We're all about trying to understand how to measure things and how to be able to put one thing up against something else. But in this case, it's like a black hole, you know?
And
So,
what's interesting about charters,
it's politics.
yeah, it is, it's what I call set aside. Yeah, well, there you go.
Yeah, I heard.
What is interesting about it is charter schools have these huge fund balances. Well, that's our money, right? And I'm kicking and screaming, holding on to my $2 million fund balance that should be $10 million. As my auditor says, you guys do not have enough of a rainy day fund. If there's a hurricane and your roof blows off, you're in big trouble. And like cyber charters have $38 million in the bank. That's taxpayers' money. Like, and again, please educate your child the way you want to educate your child. A parent should always make that decision. But it has to be fair. The ground rules have to be fair.
And just in case you're not averaged enough yet, here we go. Cyber charter schools get the same payment from the school districts as a brick and mortar charter school does. So, in other words,
Yeah.
the money that goes into charter schools comes directly from the school districts that the kids would, or either went to or would be going to.
Yeah, correct. Lived here.
And so we're in a position where with the cyber charters, almost every school district has developed their own cyber charter, their own
Cyber school.
school system
Yep.
as a way, and they do it at about a third of the cost of what the cyber charters can charge, because they charge the same as the brick and mortar things. And the reason for it is literally, it's politics. I mean, it's literally people who are protecting their school districts, their way of life, their worldview,
Who their kids hang out with. Because a lot of this is really rooted in racism. Like, they consolidated school districts. We did not create them. We have 501 school districts in Pennsylvania. 501. We should be in county school districts. Absolutely, positively, without question. But it's just not gonna happen. And when you do it on property tax, if I wanna raise $1 million and I have $1 billion worth of properties, right? I have to tax X. Radnor has $3 billion, they wanna raise $1 million, they've taxed 3 times less.
Right.
Right, so it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, the highest percentage property taxes in the Commonwealth are basically in Drexel Hill and
Contests you do not win.
Lansdowne and, basically it's the Upper Darby and the William Penn School District.
Yeah, and it's, so in the summer of 2013, Education Law Center came to William Penn and said, hey, do you want to do this lawsuit with us? We were not their first stop. They went to bigger school districts.
Do you want to bite the hand that feeds you?
What? Yeah. Well, and that, it is really funny because, everyone asks, well, did you guys, did you think about it? What were those conversations like? And it is sort of bad waving a white flag going, it's not going well here. We're going to go to the courts, we're going to go to the media, we're going to go everywhere and say it is not going well here. We're going against you, the state, like it's William Penn versus PDE. Like we're suing the state, and
Yeah, you had some help on it, yeah. I mean, they were very, very cleverly and very smartly.
Oh, we have the best lawyers.
But they picked 5 other school districts.
Yeah,
Co-defendants.
Is any attempt being made by, I'll say by the state, but to help the citizens of Pennsylvania realize the importance of an educated citizenry?
No.
I mean,
It seems to me that's the bottom
we
line.
certainly, I talk about it all the time, because very often I wind up talking to groups of seniors who are angry because they're still paying property taxes to pay for public education when their kids have been out of school for 35 years.
But that's not the point.
Well,
Yeah.
I would agree with you. However,
But that describes us.
Right, but I think that conversation in itself is exactly what the legislator wants to have. They want senior citizens to come at me for raising their taxes.
Right.
When the state legislature, and it's sort of like, go over there and fight with her, and we're gonna go over
Not
here.
this particular legislator,
Yeah,
but.
yeah.
I mean,
You know, go fight with her, and we're gonna go over here and do what we need to do, but they're gonna fight with you because you're raising your taxes.
Right.
And you're right, like, I freely admit, I'm way overtaxing my citizens. Like, it's not, I'm not gonna pretend, I'm not, but that's the only thing I can do.
but do they understand why?
I hope they do, like, I hope that I talk
When
to
people
enough
who say, well,
people.
I'm gonna move out of Wellington, we lived in Wellington for 35 years.
Yeah, they
But
say
you're not
that all
gonna
the
move
time.
out because the taxes are too high and my kids have finished school.
Well, but.
And that's,
I hear that all the time.
Right,
Yeah,
right,
I'm
and
sure
we
you
hear
do.
that all the time, but we also are taxing an item that you have to liquidate to make progress with, right? So we're forcing people into these really bad decisions. I wanna stay in my home, my taxes are going up, she's raising my taxes, I saw it on TV last week, but I wanna stay in my home. And we want you to stay in your home too, right? But this is the system that we work with. And that's why when they came to us in 2013 and said, will you do this? I was school board president at the time. And I was like, yeah, we're gonna do it. And nobody questioned it. We were gonna die if we did not do something. And we're scrappy. My district is scrappy. And we know that if we don't fight for ourselves, no one's gonna fight for us.
but then this goes on forever.
What?
But
No,
then this
so-
way of thinking goes on forever, that, you know, why
But-
Swarthmore is not Lansdowne, is not Radnor, is not,
Yeah.
if people just don't understand the value of citizens being educated, then
That's right.
I think they
It's
need
never gonna
to
end.
see what the difference is. Like, I know that you're talking about a lot of this, and you're talking about the 800-pound thing and all that. And I think if you don't have like a teacher or somebody who's in the business, or showing what the kids are actually looking like. I taught in Philadelphia. Show what a school looks like there or in there, and then show Radnor and say,
No, you're right.
is
They-
this
but they don't
fair?
listen.
So we
We've
need to
done it.
change this so that
We-
it is fair.
The first court case in 2014, the district court said out loud, if you can turn on the lights, you're a viable school district. That was their, and we all gasped. I'm sitting next to Joe Bruni, our superintendent at the time, and we're like, what the heck just happened? Well, you fast forward to last year where, what's his name? I've blocked his name out of my mind forever. Says, well, we need some kids to flip pizzas.
No, it would.
And so what
Why
do
does-
they need
why-
advanced math for?
Yeah.
Why does a student on the McDonald's track need algebra?
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've had parents call our office and say, from Wallingford Swarthmore, and say, I know people think, make judgments about how much money we make, but I'm sorry I work hard for what I get and my kids deserve this. Which is fine, but the underlying message is, and if you're not making that, then oh well for your kids.
Or your perception is
Yeah.
that they're not working hard.
They're not working hard.
And that's
It's
where they
all
are.
of that.
That's why it's a waste
Wait,
of money.
right, which is all of that.
Right.
But
But they
But
don't have the resource to work that hard if they wanted to.
it's all malarkey. Like, it's all just designed to treat young people differently based on their parents' income. And that's just criminal. Like, you're born, right? You have the same rights as every other child. But we put you in these circumstances. I have 30 kids in a classroom. I have old buildings, we're trying to do construction, and we have tools like PlanCon that aren't available to us. And the taxpayers are like, who's paying for these new buildings? I'm like, you are. Like, I don't know what to say. Like, I'm not gonna lie, but I'm also gonna advocate for PlanCon every day of my existence to try to lessen that load.
And
'Cause-
what's plan
so, go on. I'll turn the hard stuff to him.
It's another one of my bills. actually.
It wasn't your bill of 10 years ago.
No, it wasn't my
though.
bill 10 years ago. PlanCon was started as a way of sort of trying to both control and to fund the physical, the physical part of campuses for public education or public schools. So it was a way of injecting into it a process of, do you really need this? And what do you really need? How do these things kind of work? And how does it work with your master plan? And how does it work with, all these other kinds of things? And then it provided funding, a match, right? You still needed to match it.
I would think it was only like 30%.
30%, yeah, kind of thing. But it was a system that worked. It worked for, I think, 3 years, and then,
And it worked for everyone.
yeah,
Like it worked for Radnor, it worked for us, it worked for everyone.
it worked for Altoona, it worked for Erie, it worked
Right,
for.
it worked.
And then, for reasons I have never been able to really quite find out, we stopped funding. I mean, it was during the lean years, when things were whatever, it was decided that was something. But it stayed on the book, so it was still a process. There were still people applying for it, still going through parts of the early parts of it. There was just no money at the end, kind of to make it happen. About 3 years ago, it was revamped, and this small group did a statewide tour, and they looked at facilities all over the place and figured out they tweaked it and changed it to make it work better, make it work a little more equitably. We still haven't funded it. We know that there are a few studies that have been done that think that the cost for providing equitable education in the Commonwealth right now is somewhere around $7 billion. But that does not include any infrastructure. All the building things. The estimate right now is in Philadelphia has an $8 billion problem just in and of itself, in terms of trying to bring their buildings up to a level that is appropriate. So it's a huge issue. It's gargantuan.
Yeah, it's another tool that we could use. Our youngest building is 1973. Right? And we've been kicking that can down the road as long as we can. The truth is that one-to-one, if a student has a computer, we don't have enough power in our buildings. There's not, now, we don't appear to have asbestos, right? We don't have that. We have 6 buildings that aren't air conditioned. Well, that doesn't work, right? Because it's 100 degrees in the first week of September.
Right.
I'm sending my students home half days because I can't keep them in those buildings. And yet I'm supposed to get to the finish line at the same time as everybody else. One of the things, so in all truth, I just came from a 3-day school board director conference in the Poconos. So I've been radicalized. But one of the things that worries me, because
we're probably doing the radicalization.
No, not really, but maybe. One of the things that worries me is they talk about funding the lawsuit, but then they're like, well, how are we going to know that we're getting the most for our money? And what are they going to do with that money? And I'm just like, first of all, it's called local control, and I know what's best for my young people. And if my young people need mental health services, we have a mental health clinic in every building right now. And that's only due to COVID dollars. When COVID happened, they knew right where to find us. We had a 4-year plan to get one-to-one. We got one-to-one with Chromebooks in 90 days because they threw us down money. They knew right away where to send the money. They knew where to send it for mental health. Like they had, I was like, wow, you guys know where we are. And
There's some people talking to
Is this all politics?
I think, it is all politics because he holds the purse, but.
No, but I mean, is it strictly Republican, Democrat, different position, perspective?
No.
I think it's geographic.
Geographic's a big part of it. I mean, the basic idea is that the southeast keeps growing. We keep getting larger, our school district keeps getting bigger. There's more people moving in, there's more whatever. Everywhere else in Pennsylvania really is on the decrease. So, for example, one of the things we haven't really mentioned at this point is there is something called the fair funding formula, which was instigated, which was the attempt was to try to make funding go where it was actually really needed, as opposed to, and that was in and of itself was great. But and there's the but is that there was a hold harmless provision added to it, which basically said, if we've given a school district X number of dollars, we won't give them less than that.
Even if their population changes.
Right.
They lose a business, they lose a base, they lose, for whatever reason. So you had 4,000 students, but now you only have 2,000 students? You're
still
still
get the same
So
amount.
that people get
You get the-
funded based on
That makes
that
sense.
historical,
So much of it makes
Well-
no sense.
that's because the politics of
So
a
that's
legislator
where
going back to his own district and saying, we're gonna fund it forever now, so you're gonna get,
But
3/4 of what you used to get, kind of thing. And
Right.
it's like, that's very, it's untenable, but, it's not just, the middle of nowhere, it's not just, it's Pittsburgh is that way too. Pittsburgh actually their school district is substantially smaller than what they used to be. And they're still getting funded as if they were large.
Yeah.
So they have pretty reasonable property taxes around Pittsburgh, actually.
So I sat down for lunch at this school board directors conference, and I had an assistant superintendent from Warren County, northwest corner, right? So my district might be 10 square miles. I don't know, I don't really,
Probably not, probably smaller.
right, might be. Hers is 768 square miles. They have 86 buses, and I remember this only because I was shocked, and 68 little vans, because some of the places they can't get to with a school bus.
Oh my gosh.
They drive 10,000 miles a day to get their students back. And they're talking about consolidation, and that didn't go over well. That's why they're still driving 10,000 miles a day. But it's really, like, a lot of the problems I have, rural Pennsylvania has the same.
Oh, absolutely.
They, in Warren County, supply every student with a hotspot because the Wi-Fi is so spotty in where they live. I'm like, why do you live there?
But you still have to have cell service to have a
Right.
hotspot.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
I mean, our family has a
Yeah,
place in central
It's
Pennsylvania,
just-
you don't have either.
yeah, and it's, back to us deciding, it was really a very easy decision to fight for ourselves. It takes a lot of, the lawyers are free, but our admin has to do all this work. We have to call on our young people to advocate for us, which is never comfortable. Like, why am I asking 16-year-olds to go into court to tell their story? That is awful. Like, if I went to the Philadelphia Commission hearing, like, we're torturing children, right? Like, they're young people. Like, the young lady from Philadelphia talked about, what her school, how she didn't feel safe, that it wasn't a healthy place for her to be. Why is that? Like, why are we doing it? And what do we expect? Like, test scores, which is a federal mandate, not a state mandate necessarily, so we can blame the feds for that. But you want my third grader, who may or may not have enough food. Now, I feed 2 meals a day, no questions asked. We are a CEB school district, which is a fabulous program. I cannot teach a student that's hungry. And we have so much food insecurity amongst our young people, and it's great. But that third grader, if you look at the test, first of all, they're economically biased. Like, if you don't get to a zoo, or you don't get to canoe down the Raritan, and taking those other learning experiences, because you don't have the money and poverty to do so, it shouldn't count against you. Like, they were used, one time I was walking by a kid taking the PSSAs, and they used the word canoe in the third grade, copy. Now, if they had said rowboat, the kid would have known. But you didn't know what a canoe was. When did you run into a canoe in Derby? Like, when it floods, like, what's going on? Yeah. So it's just, our lawyers have said out loud and in the paper now that if they don't see movement within the next budget, we'll be in court next summer again. Because we're not gonna wait.
Well, you were in for 10 years the first time.
Yeah.
What kind of movement?
So they have a surplus, right? They have a surplus. They could, like, right now, Level Up is not funded.
That's right.
So I have a $800,000 hole in my budget right now. Okay, I have 2 million in my fund balance, so if I have to take that 800,000 out, or in some way not do $800,000 worth of programs, I don't know what that looks like, I'm gonna go into next year with a deficit, which I really shouldn't do. Like, that's not legal. But,
Might be moral.
yeah, but we have to figure it out. We're just losing
You guys are kind
generations.
of preaching to the choir here.
Right.
I mean, we all are on your side.
Yeah, no, and those,
What can be done about it?
Yeah, what's possible?
I mean, what's possible? What do you do?
harassed him.
I'm sitting here more depressed than I was when I came in.
Well, you know, I think our legislators are awesome. You know, Regina Curry, Jen O'Mara, like and a lot of them are school board directors. Mary Gay Scanlon, whenever I see her, I'm like IDEA. Like, cause there's a couple pieces of the puzzle for me. And our district, one is charter school reform. Just don't base it on 1999 rules and we'll all be good. What's interesting and what Tim left out is, so not only do the cybers get the same amount as the bricks and mortar, but in the normal school district, there's around 6% speech and language problems. In the charters, there's 30%. So no, they're not 30% speech and language problems. In the charters, they figured out how to get another $6,000 from us. And transportation. So they can't sit on, for me, they cannot sit on public dollars. If they're not using those public dollars, they need to come back to their district. We need to consolidate. We have a great cyber school. Our kids are in band, our kids are in sports. Like, we should educate as many of our students as we can. And we should do it well. But I also need mental health. My nurses are seeing 90 students a day in 6 hours. I mean, I want to be a community health center. Truthfully, just fund me. When the CDC says, hey, you know, mental health is best dealt with in the schools, fund me. I would love to continue my mental health services.
So what is the answer to all this?
If you could blow up the system,
Yeah,
right, and
I
start
would.
fresh, like, what would it look like?
I would fund schools on personal income, not property. I think Wolf's plan when he came in, although he was a horrible negotiator, to give back 50% of your property taxes and raise the PIT, what was it, 1.25 or something like that. I think you should pay on what you make, right? Like, if you are of wealth, pay a little more. Like, I'm sorry,
Well-
if we had on personal income tax, seniors would pay less, right? And get rid of the loophole. Stop corporations running to Delaware to start a corporation. Like, what do you tell me? There's 4 states in the country that don't have
Yeah.
a stepped personal state income tax.
So, literally, the first thing I would do, you know, would be to change income tax. We have a flat tax in Pennsylvania. We're one of only 4 states left in the country that still have a flat tax, which means that everybody pays same percentage of your income, whether you make $10 or whether you make $10 million. You know, but for us to change that in Pennsylvania requires a constitutional amendment. And then that, you know, becomes you know, we get accused of playing class warfare and all these other kinds of things when we bring up stuff along those lines. But the difference is that, you know, there would be more money to work with if we had a graduate tax that sort of worked that way. So
Well, that's a political issue.
I have another one.
Well, it's
I mean,
hard for me
because
not to
you're-
see everything as a political
Right.
issue.
Well,
I mean,
This is a
because-
political
But
issue.
the guys that are wealthy are gonna wanna stay wealthy. They're not gonna.
Right, and look, they write the checks to the politicians.
Right.
It's shocking, right?
Really?
Like, it's shocking, and what, you know, you could get rid of unfunded mandates. That'd save me a couple $1 million. Stop pretending that you're letting me do what I wanna do, and you're mandating this, that, and the other thing.
But I still get back to the question I asked you, 10 minutes ago. Is anybody trying to truly make an effort to have the citizenry understand the benefits of everyone having a good education? no matter where they
Yeah, I
go.
don't-
Getting the citizenry to really kind of understand what's at the heart of most of the issues that we deal with on the state level is very difficult. People are busy, they're not paying attention, they're not, we see this all the time, trying to literally get the message out. I mean,
They would vote all the time if
But I
they
mean, it
did.
seems like the only message we get is what's coming in the next few months, a vote for paying out X, Y, Z.
well, I mean, I don't know, we, on my legislative, because, in politics you have campaign side and the legislative side, and the two can't mix, right? They're got to stay completely. So in our legislative office, we put out a newsletter, for example, that's 4 pages long and talks about all the issues that we're trying to deal with in Harrisburg and what we're doing, those things. And that seems to resonate with people because it's something they can stick in front of them and they read it and they, whatever. Although we still get people who call up the office and say, why are you sending me this political crap? Well, it's not really political, it's the.
But I think it seems so much of the time like it is, unfortunately.
Yeah,
Well-
I think it's hard. Like, I try to do talks in Lansdowne, and people are where we are. Like, I think that's the job of elected folks, is to sort of present the moral structure, and like education of everyone, adult education, fire alarm education. Like, we still have smoke detectors, beeping.
Early childhood.
Early child nutrition, right? We literally have someone give birth, let him out of the hospital, 2 days later. We don't teach them about childhood nutrition. We just check the darn car seat. So I think if you educate everyone,
And not really check the way it should. But,
well,
See,
they
but
check my car seat. I'm sure.
But she brings up, like, if you talk about all these things being intertwined or whatever, last year I heard the Secretary of Health describe Delaware County as a maternal health care desert. When the obstetrics unit at Delaware County Memorial was closed down. And how difficult that was. And if you look at the statistics on black maternal health in Delaware County, it's positively, it's beyond frightening.
The whole
And it's like-
United States is not very good. is it?
No, it's
Yeah.
not, but Delaware County in
We're way
particular
down
is
there.
Black
awful
women
with black
are-
women.
It's
Yeah.
awful. It's
Yeah.
awful. And, like, we don't have an emergency room anymore, right? Mercy is gone. Delaware County's gone.
Yeah, you have to go to Lankenau or to
I'm going Penn.
Penn.
Yeah, but we don't
Or you go
have,
to
we don't
Chester.
have those, we don't have those things.
There was, when Delaware County Memorial closed down the obstetrics unit, they had a sign up on the door telling women which 2 buses to take to get to Chester, to Crozier Chester.
So Tim, what's possible in terms of education? I mean, I understand, it's a mess. It's clear to see that. What looking forward, what can be done to start to address these? I'm sure it won't solve everything, but what can be done?
Well, we have to change.
Politically, I mean.
I think politically, we need to figure out how to fund it without relying so much on property taxes.
But is that doable as you see the dynamics of the legislature?
I think it is doable. I think it's.
How many generations?
Well, but I think a lot of, I don't want to be overly political about this, but I think it would be a much different question if we were looking at a Democratic majority in the Senate, a Democratic majority in the House.
But that's not gonna happen anytime soon, I'd
We're
say.
3 seats away from the Senate.
of life will be that.
So,
Really? 3 seats away?
3 seats away in the Senate. And it's not, when I won my race, we flipped 5 seats, and none of them were expected to win. In terms of in the common wisdom kind of thing. My seat, Republicans have basically held that since the Civil War, with the exception of there was one Democrat elected right after Watergate, and he didn't even finish out his whole term. But it's so in terms of that kind of big fundamental change happening. I look at that 764 pages that we said.
68.
68. I look at that document and I think, my God, if this isn't the thing that's gonna, actually force us to do something, get off our asses and actually figure out what it is. I'm worried that the hearings that are going on now are kind of a bit of lip service and a bit of, whatever, not really changing minds or whatever. But, in the end, and it may take, Jennifer's lawyers to come back at us again next year. well, we haven't really made any real movement towards how to solve it.
Well, does the clarion call go straight to accountability? Like, be accountable for the money
They
going to
don't care.
cyber schools and the money going.
They don't care.
I thought
Legislators.
when I first got elected, I thought cyber charters were low-hanging fruit. We'd be able to solve that
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
I mean,
Can't you get that
I
called
couldn't-
up?
I was like, no, it's, I mean, you have the Jeffrey Yasses of the world who.
Google him, if you've
you know,
not,
he's
know who he is.
The wealthiest man in Pennsylvania who dabbles in.
Charter schools.
Well, he was the,
He
like
was
last
Chester
year,
Community.
last term, on the Senate Education Committee, he was the largest single donor to every single Republican on
Oh, wow. Well, that's
Committee.
what, follow the money.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line.
Well, and Pennsylvania is a great state for that statement. Like, it is just, like Jeffrey, Google him.
What's
Like,
his last name?
Yes,
Yes.
YASS.
yes. Like, just Google him, you'll be up the rest of the night. Like, you will, like,
Anybody ever read the book Dark Money?
no, but I'm reading, the
Race
book
and the
you,
politics of
yeah,
deception.
yeah, the one
Yeah,
Sarah
read that.
recommended.
What's the name of that one?
Yeah.
Race and the Politics of Deception.
Yeah,
It's about Chester and Delaware
Chester.
County. If you haven't read it, it's a must.
Yeah, we read that in book club.
Yeah,
It's really, wow.
well, that's a fun book club. I hope you have a lot of wine. But I think it can be done, right? Like, I sit where I sit, and I go, this is doable. In 2006, Donna Cooper did a costing out study. Very basic, right? We're all in the room with Ed Rendell, and I thought it was done. Like, I thought this was done. When Donna said it, she convinced me. Ed Rendell was behind it. Like, it was all good, and it was logical, right? Child A gets X. Child A with a learning difference gets X plus Y. Child A, who's a special ed student, gets X plus, special ed. It made total sense to me, totally easy. And here we sit in 2023, and, the lawyers update us every other month. The commission has to, they came up with this commission, and truthfully, I sat in Philly and listened. I'm like, this is the same stuff we talked about in court. Like, you're just pulling out different kids. The governor's people are saying nothing. They're just sitting at the end of the table doing nothing. Not to be political, but when
How can you not be?
when Shapiro ran, like, and I was like, there's a charter school issue here, and people that I trust were like, yeah, there's no such thing as a perfect candidate. Well, this one, maybe a good president at some point, but what happened?
It is to solve the Pennsylvania problem.
Yeah, what happened with that budget is a disaster. Like, I'm sitting here, it's October, and I have an $800,000 hole in my budget because I guessed wrong, because these guys were late, and they didn't even pass a full budget. Like, it's just, for me, it's negligence, right? It's negligence against children. And then you wonder, oh, why is that kid acting out? We took, when COVID happened, there was a tax credit. It took 6,000 children in Delaware County
Out of poverty.
out of poverty.
And now they're all right back.
Out of poverty. Took them out of poverty, right? Again, COVID happens, they know exactly what to do. And like you said the other day, those parents went out and spent that money, right? They had extra money, they bought more food. They bought from the grocer, they bought, they could afford things.
We have an $8 billion surplus right now.
Right. That's sitting in the bank.
Sitting in the general fund. And it's basically, the reason it's there, it's like the best argument I've ever heard against trickle-down economics ever, is that, that money that went directly into people's pockets during the pandemic, all those people, they got their kids karate lessons for the first time, or they, whatever, but they spent it. And the neighborhood store where they spent it in, they spent it again. And then somebody else spent it, and somebody else spent it.
And we all
And
got
it's
sales
circulating.
tax.
And we all get the
Right.
sales tax. And literally every quarter since the midpoint of the pandemic, we've we've exceeded our expectations in terms of the money that's been, the revenue that's been coming into for our coffers. And we're arguing over a financial cliff that's supposed to happen 5 years from now.
Right. And, you know, they put more money in SNAP benefits, food stamps, to folks. So what do now, when we hit a recession? They take away the federal the tax credit, and they reduce their food stamps.
Yeah.
Right, like, it just, from where I sit, makes no sense whatsoever.
And I think parents about waste, fraud, and abuse.
Who's
Yeah,
benefiting
yeah.
from all this?
Yeah, and that's what I think is at the crux of the matter. They don't trust folks like me to educate. They say, we'll deputize you, you can run for election, but we really don't trust you to not waste that money and not educate those people.
But who benefits from the present situation?
The rich folks.
They're wealthy.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
always do.
so look at
The
it.
system's definitely rigged, yes, but it's,
College enrollment's down,
Right.
right? And college is very, very expensive. Chances are my young people cannot afford it. And
Well, it depends on what, I don't necessarily agree with that, I mean, it depends on where they want to go to school, whether they can get grants.
Yeah, no, but when a school, that sounds good, but when a school is 50,000, like I just had this, I'm having this argument with an alumni now. They're giving a $20,000 scholarship to any HBCU our kids can get into. Well, the school's 40. Where do they come up with the other 20?
Right.
Right? And the college loan is sometimes based on your parents' credit, which is sort of weird, right? So your parent had a tough time, so now you're gonna have a tough time getting a loan to go to school? Like, it just, you know, my son, my youngest son, the twin, from a bad district, is now in medical school. And he's probably the only kid in the school that doesn't have a doctor in his family. And so we have legacy, so we keep perpetuating. You have a doctor in your family, you're gonna get into medical school quicker. Right? Like, we keep perpetuating all this stuff that keeps my young people out of the mix. Most of them, now we'll have exceptions. Like, we had a young lady that got into all the Ivy schools last year. She is exceptional. She got full rides plus to every single one of them. Harvard, Yale, Columbia, MIT, like she got into all of them.
Wow.
And she, you know, was very disciplined. We'll say her father, raised by her father, very disciplined. Didn't have a cell phone. TV was not a thing, like very focused on where she needed to go. But it's harder for my other, you know, the other
And
person.
it was harder for her, right?
It was harder for her, but if she was at least out of poverty.
Yeah.
When you're worried about where your next meal's coming from, if you play football and you don't get home and there's not like a robust meal on the table, like we literally have a refrigerator in our locker room so kids can take home food. Food's expensive. If you got a couple of kids, like it's hard to feed your kids.
Maybe on the weekends.
And it just shouldn't be that way. Right? Like, I need different supports. I need an afternoon bus. I don't have parents that drive. When we have events at school, we run buses for the parents. Right? They don't drive. Some of them don't drive. So we run buses, put them on a school bus, get them to school. It's a lovely situation. It's actually fabulous. But there's certain things that mental health, they can't
That's a
get
big
mental health
issue
help.
today with young people.
They cannot get mental health help. If they have insurance, you know how bad your insurance is to covering mental health help, right? And if you can get to the practitioner after school on Saturday, everybody's full because everybody's having an issue. They just need different things. They need more adults. They need smaller classrooms. They need more, they move around a lot, right? In poverty, you're gonna move. We have registered 700 new students since August 28th. We're only a district of 5,000 students.
William Penn and Upper Darby both have a full-time administrator who does nothing but register new students.
Yeah.
All year.
Wow.
You know, in
And
terms of
the number of different languages in the right.
Yeah, Upper Darby, yeah.
80 languages in the Switzerland.
Yeah, and we're getting up there too, but oftentimes they don't admit to the language, so we're like, oh, that's why you're not getting it. This really isn't your language.
But, there was a question about, is there any hope before, or, what can we really, and I still remain optimistic about it. I mean, in part just because I'm an optimistic person.
I couldn't get up if I wasn't
Yeah.
optimistic about it.
But, there were lots of lessons that we learned during the pandemic that we really need to build upon. Just before the pandemic hit, Shapiro, who was then the Attorney General, put together this basically program that allowed students to call in if they suspected that one of their classmates was going to be violent.
Safe to say.
Safe to say it was called. And basically, you could call in and word would get to the proper people who could help this person, whatever. What really happened, and it really, especially during the pandemic, was that 90% of the calls were about mental health. They weren't about violence. And people who were either scared about one of their friends or classmates or about themselves. And so that's, it really brought home to the legislature, the need for school-based, mental health issues, mental health help.
Well, that money goes away.
It was another unfunded mandate, wasn't it?
Hopefully it's getting funded, and some of the money is still floating out
We'll
the
see.
budget. We'll see.
This is something a little up my alley. My career's been in mental health, mental illness. One of the things we work with the language. People refer to everything as mental health. It seems a simple thing, but if you reframe the issue as mental illness, you see it a different way. What are the problems people are having? Mental health isn't just this thing that happens to you. What are the specific things that are happening to you? And it drives me crazy when people say, we need to improve mental health.
Well, poverty is probably a
Trauma.
big one.
Well, so everyone's,
Trauma are the two.
and it's funny because the ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and actually someone told me this week, they're like, oh, we want to call it positive childhood experiences. I'm like, okay. But adverse childhood experiences don't even deal with food insecurity.
Yeah.
Right, that is, if you've had someone in your family with a serious illness, someone incarcerated, divorce, something, I don't know, my kid was like, your ACEs score is way higher than you tell people. Read this book. But it is the level of trauma that some of my students have seen. And I want to be clear, it's really not a lot to do with them being black and poor. The level of gun violence in our society is all over. And I think that the drug problem, the designer drugs and the alcoholism, all of those things.
And then the United States is the biggest consumer of all that stuff.
Yeah,
So if we didn't consume,
well, I just think it's hard. Like, I think it's hard out there, and some people have more resources than others. Like, if I want to, if I have a rough day and I want to go in my room and close the door and it's quiet, some people don't even have a quiet space to go to. Right? Rent's really expensive now. So where are you living? I had someone tell me they moved from Derby to Chester because Chester was cheaper. And that's just crazy. Like rent, it's crazy.
Yeah, but every childhood experience.
Yeah.
Well, even you're in a classroom and you've got a bunch of first graders or kindergartners. It's their first thing with school, and we're doing an active shooter drill. Everybody go over in the corner and be quiet. how would you feel?
Yeah, well, it even goes to the other side of that is most of my students come to me without any educational experience, right? No,
Yeah.
they can't afford pre-K.
No Head Start?
A little Head Start, 20%. But I would say easily 75% of my kids come with no school experience. So they don't know that. Sit down and raise your hand. It's not their fault. They're 5, right? They're 5. But they don't know that. They haven't had that experience. We talk about sharing, and we as adults don't share. Come on. And we want a 5-year-old to share. Right? So it's just, there's a lot of trauma. There's a lot of, incarcerated fathers for things that other people wouldn't be incarcerated for. Like, it's just all broken. It's real, and I am hopeful, because otherwise I wouldn't get up. And when I'm not hopeful, I go to a school and hang out there for a couple hours, and then I'm hopeful. Because the young folks are lovely. They're lovely. And if we want enough doctors, enough nurses, enough teachers, we will treat them right. Because
Pay them what they get, what they deserve.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah. It's a promise we just failed to keep.
Well, I always hate to see, some of my colleagues, right before the school year, it's like everybody's doing their Amazon wish list because they need supplies, because they don't have them. Or, I've had friends who have had to, I've got 36 kids in my classroom, I've got 30 books. So she's running down to the copier to make copies so that she can actually teach these kids.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because my school supply list, I'm on a rant. Because our school supply list is like breaking a bank. And it's not, I think you should just walk into school. I don't need 10 boxes of tissues, a box of highlighters. I don't think you should have to buy that. But it is challenging. It is challenging. We have a full, Radnor has 25 AP classes. I have 18, right? I know from my personal experience that if you are intrinsically motivated and have at least a parent or an adult at home going, get up, go to school, do your work, and keeping an eye on you, that you'll be okay. But if your parents are trying to, work an hourly job, and I have you come in for parent-teacher conferences where you have to take off. Now, that's been one nice thing about COVID, right? We'll do parent-teacher conferences via Zoom now. We would have never gotten there. We would have been like, no way, you're coming in, forget it. And it's nice, right? The kids are home, a parent's nearby. But it's just disrespectful. It just, for me, feels really, really disrespectful. And we just, you got money in the bank. If we don't invest in children, what do we have left? Right? We got nothing.
So we need to bug you more.
Now, he's easy.
You can say we have.
And we bug Sarah because she'll actually get something done.
See, I think one of the things is too, and this was expressed to me by a friend of mine who was one of the 6th grade teachers at my school, and she said, and the kids know it. Especially middle school kids, they know it. They know that, the rules are different for them because they live in the city. They know that the rules are different.
Well, literally at the high school, on the basketball court, it's painted on the court. It says, we do more with less.
Yep.
It's literally painted on the floor of the gymnasium.
Wow. It's weird, right? That's just first of all, what are we bragging about? Going off of that.
You're just telling the truth.
Yeah, but it is, and that's sort of
It's supposed to be motivational.
Yeah, it's funny because, they say, money doesn't matter. And I'm like, we just spent $16 million on a football field and a track. We have world-class Olympian track students that have never
Ran on a cinder track.
have never run a home meet at their school. Now, I don't like spending $16 million on a field. I do not. But I'm telling you, when you go there as a product of William Penn, as someone who's been ingrained in it, it makes you cry every single time. I took a picture of it and sent it to my kids. They graduated in 2015. I'm like, where's that? Like, that's Kurt Field, hon, you know? But, you know, our students are so worthy of the investment. And that's what it is, right? It's an investment in our youth. And
Well, they're our future.
yeah, well, and who's gonna take care of us? Like, you know, the jobs that you want them to have families. You want them to have intact families. We have destroyed their families with you know, other policies, right? We have destroyed their families. Now we go, you know, Johnny, why are you pissed off today? Johnny has a zillion reasons to be angry. He really, really does. And he just needs someone to talk to about him and to feel heard and for them to not keep happening to them. But they're lovely, lovely human beings. They're entitled to every single thing. And we just got to deliver it. And we will.
I think so. I think, you know, at the core of the problem is really trying to understand that we have to fundamentally change the sort of what we sort of understand as the American ideal or the American dream or the whatever. This whole idea about pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and, you know, is all pretty much a load of crap because it's, you know, we really do, we have a very successful war on the poor and we have an awful lot of people who believe it's ingrained in them that in order for them to succeed, someone else needs to fail. And, you know, that's just not the way the world really
My kids are definitely taking their jobs. Definitely taking their kids' jobs. Because if you can make it at a William Penn successfully, you take that ingenuity and that all of that into everywhere you go. And it's just weird. It's just.
Well, one of the big things in the lawsuit was really kind of kept pointing out and going back to was either the generational wealth or the lack of it.
Yeah.
You know, and it's the, you know, when your grandfather had money, then you're much more likely to have money than if, you know, it's.
Takes money to make money, right?
Yeah, and it's.
We make that a barrier, sure.
But we're also, you know, so many people got their start in the middle class with things like the GI Bill after World War II, and I didn't really realize that the vast majority of black soldiers, that wasn't eligible. They weren't eligible for that. They weren't part of that, you know, and it's, you know, the red, if you look at like maps, the redlining maps from the 20s and the 30s, and then you do an overlay of tree coverage over the same thing. It's stunning how the way that correlates in between the haves have tons of trees, and
You
you know,
can
the have-nots are
overlay
still 10 degrees hotter in the
poisoning,
summertime.
HIV prevalence.
Yep.
It all looks the same. It
Yeah.
all looks the same.
And that's what, but that's fundamentally, that's how bad, the education is the manifestation. The problem we have in the education is a manifestation of all the other kind of social things that we're constantly struggling with and are constantly trying to.
Yeah, and I think also when it came to bad schools, the family wealth of that home that would usually be sold upon someone's death and distributed, because that was, real estate was wealth. When the schools became bad and that wealth came out of that home, you took that family wealth away. And that's a little bit of the conversation we have, I try to have with citizens is, if we get your schools better, your house is gonna be worth more, good or bad, right? Because then we're gonna reassess, and that's a disaster. And you're still in your home and you still have to pay your taxes, which is, again, hard to liquidate your home. But it's that family wealth, right? That, you know, that you have this dream that your house is your wealth and that your child, you know, you can borrow against your house and you can do things to, you know, but college has been so expensive and we need the trades. Like in somewhere, right, in all this policy, right, like a roofer somehow was less respected than a teacher. And now, when any of us can find a good roofer, you share it with all your friends, right? You share it with all your friends, like now, that's valued. We have to revalue teachers also. I don't have enough teachers, and it doesn't look like I'm gonna have enough teachers.
It's, part of we're having discussions now around I sit on the Higher Education Funding Commission, and even though we haven't actually met for almost 3 years now, but it's.
What is that job?
Well, but the thing is, the PASHE schools, the state system schools, those were all founded as teachers' colleges. And they were set up in a very particular place in order to draw students from that area, in order to provide teachers in that area. They've all become universities at this point, and they all, barely have an educational, piece to them, and they're all in competition with each other for their students, because no one thinks twice about driving 3 hours to go to college. And in fact, some kids think that they need to do that, right, in order to, because of the story we told them, and and everything else about that. But then, laid on top of that, we also have the Penn State system, which has all these satellite campuses now. Those satellite campuses were all founded as ways to take students from various parts of the Commonwealth, get their educational level up to a point where they could go to main campus for their last two years. All of those satellite schools have now become universities of their own, and they have master's programs in there, at Penn State Brandywine, so this relentless drive towards more and more education feeds this, the cost of college and everything else, but it also fundamentally misses the things that we actually need, because we are so desperate for teachers right now in the Commonwealth that we're literally trying to come up with ways.
Fun that either, right?
Yeah, I know. It's okay.
Well, you keep telling us what to teach,
Well, but that's the thing too, right? Like, we have to deputize some folks. Like, if my mom was a teacher, right? And she'd you can come in, it's mandated on my contract, how many times you can come in. Other than that, the door is shut, and I'm gonna teach my students. I'm a professional. You don't tell a roofer how to roof. I'm gonna do it. But it is fascinating.
We do. We tell them.
Yeah, okay, good. And that's why you got fired by your wife. But, hot tip, DCCC is quite a value, right? $300 a credit. Here's another hot tip I didn't know. With your DCC associates, Drexel is 50% off for the rest of it. So I didn't know that. So it's pretty cool, but
So
we gotta
on
fix
that
that.
very
Yeah.
positive note.
Yeah, she's like,
We're done.
We're
We're done.
I just want to say that during the early part of the pandemic, I shouldn't have been so shocked, because I know that this school district is diverse in many ways, to outsiders' surprise. But my jaw dropped when I realized they were providing food for the weekends for certain kids. I think a lot of Wallingford folks would be stunned to know that that's what the school was.
We were doing it here.
And we were doing it here too. Yeah, and we continue to help with the school. Well, anyway, I had
kids
to
can
get
eat
that
a
in.
lot of food when they're home.
I know. So I really want to thank you both for coming.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Well,
Both well.
So, can I just ask, kind of go along with what I think Carol said, what can we do to help?
So, it's funny you mentioned writing letters. When you send an email to the legislature, it gets entered into the system and becomes part of the database that we use all the time for various things. And most people are reluctant to send a letter to their senator or their representative if they think the representative already agrees with them. And so, we get a ton of angry, emails all the time about various people, usually about property taxes, but we're very good at responding to them too, actually. But write your, contact them, make phone calls to them, whatever, to your rep, your senator, or even somebody else's representative.
That's what I think too.
Saying they may or may not, a lot of people won't talk to you if you're not in their district. But still, you can send an email, send whatever. Because when it becomes part of the database, it becomes part of the numbers that we can use, when we talk about what our constituents want. In Harrisburg, there's always discussions about, playing to your district, and well, my district doesn't want me to, that doesn't work in my district, or, those kinds of
And I think show
excuses
up.
or ways or whatever.
Like show up at the voting booth. Every single time. Yeah, and get your neighbors there, because you guys are great. We still have categorically less than 50% people voting. And
I think they should make it, I
And-
think they should have a holiday for voting.
Who are the candidates that are gonna do something about this?
so that finding the information is tough. I think around here, our legislators are pretty well aligned. So that means we have work to do in Perry County. Like support, like Google, like who's running in Perry County, and send a check to somebody that's running against evil.
The thing about no individual, unless they're the president pro tem of the Senate or the Senate Majority Leader, have the ability, the power to make anything by themselves. It's really a team sport, and it's certainly in the Senate, I'm constantly shifting and constantly trying to figure out who we can work with on this issue, who we can work with on that issue. There are some people I'm working with. I'm actually working with John DeSanto, who's a senator from Dauphin County, around land reform and zoning reform bills, basically aimed at getting more housing built. And that's my aim, and we're using this time with DeSanto. I also sit in the education committee with him, and the shit that comes out of his mouth during these hearings, I just can't believe. And it's he's transphobic and believes that LGBTQs is a lifestyle problem.
But that's right in Central Bucks. Like you don't have to go to Dauphin County.
We had a book banning.
Really?
We had a book banning today.
Like Google what's going on in Central Bucks School District. Like they spent $1 million on lawyers defending book banning.
Right.
First of all, that $1 million could do a lot of good in my district. Like that's a.
They ban the books, they're more interested in reading them.
Well,
it's a culture war.
yeah, it's a culture war.
All right, so
I know you can't get us to shut up.
No, it's great. There's a lot to talk about.
Thank you.
Next on